Chapter 18. An hour later, a Dlamacin shuttle arrived and hovered in front of the Walker home. Dlamacin shuttlecraft are quite unique in several areas. First, they tend to be armed, heavily armed. We are a predatory species after all, and since this belonged to a formerly exploratory vessel that was part of our military arm, this one was no exception. Or it wouldn't have been, except that it was. The metal plating around the gun ports had obviously been removed and reattached, and Bonnie could immediately tell that I noticed. Even on friendly terms, the humans have enough sense to know you don't let guests run around your house with guns what might go off by accident or intent, she said with a sage nod. The ship was otherwise intact, and it had the slight shimmer of the distributive energy shielding that would resist small-scale fire very well and minimize the damage from even heavier hitters, at least for a little while. And because it was Dlamacin, of course it had redundancy built into the design. It was rounded and sloped to ensure projectile fire would be guided away from a penetrating blow. A simple rope ladder came down from above a moment later. "This is very low-tech," Fauve remarked as she saw us off. "Were you by chance thinking we'd be using tug beams or something, lass?" Bonnie Red asked, cocking her head to one side and letting her ears flop down as she spoke. "I don't know. Kinda," Fauve replied and scratched her head. "A rope ladder is pretty anticlimactic. You can't do a grand send-off for an adventure on a rope ladder. That kind of tech takes up valuable space. There isn't a use for that when a bit of rope will do just as well." "But," Bonnie Red said and grabbed the swaying rope ladder by the rung, "this rope is pretty high-tech. It's made of metamaterials that you can't heat up and it won't cut easy. The rungs be made of a similar material. This simple rope lass does its job right, and that's all it's got to do. Sometimes you just got to make things what work." "Still," Fauve protested. "Also watch this," Bonnie Red said and waved the rest of us up. We clambered up the 30 rungs ahead of her, and I strapped myself into the cold white metal seating. Another feature of Dlamacin shuttles is that they have 720-degree visualization from the interior. What this means is that, wherever you look, if something isn't secured to the wall obstructing your view, you can see a display on the other side of the wall, as if it weren't there. Which is why when the ship started moving before the door closed, I was able to see the Bonnie Red was on the ladder waving farewell while we were still in motion, waving goodbye to a distant Fauve as the shuttle increased the distance between itself and the Walker home. For even a Dlamacin soldier, that was insane to my mind. Bonnie, however, was a specialized class of soldier, a scout. Scouts take insane behavior to a new level, almost human, really. Were they not also modified to not only increase their strength, but also their spatial awareness and agility, making acrobatic maneuvers that were on par with human Olympic athletes look like warm-ups. She climbed into the shuttle a few moments later and smacked a panel on the wall. The rope ladder retracted at a pace of 5 rungs per second and disappeared into the floor just before the shuttle door descended and sealed us in. Bao was staring at Bonnie Red as if our resident pirate queen was stark raving mad. I sympathized with her silent stare. I had to think that even among outliers, Bonnie Red was unusual. An outlier among outliers who carried her reckless bravado to extremes. It was this very facet of her personality, that panache, that seemed to endear her to humans so much. Her reckless pursuit of the goal during our game of ballyball made her a crowd favorite, and it seems it was just so much a part of her character that she just couldn't turn it off, even if all she was doing was giving a dramatic wave goodbye to a single human girl. "Bow," she said to my sister, and then pointed up to the front of the shuttle. "Get up there and provide nav guidance." The pirate shtick was gone, and she was the peremptory commander again. It was easy to picture her on the bridge of a ship, giving the order to open fire and being instantly obeyed. She went and strapped herself in up at the front beside her pilot, and Bao quickly followed. The shuttle hummed as the vibratory harmonics responded to the magnetic field of the Earth to push us along. The Dlamacin shuttle pilot tapped the nav screen and opened his hand in front of it to span the map out. "This area is designated Chicago, according to the old maps. There's a lot of forest around it now, and here's the latest sat imagery. Where do we need to go to make a safe landing?" Bao listened until completion, and then began tapping the screen. Thankfully, Dlamacin tech has become so standardized over centuries, and so intuitive that it is fairly easy to pick up and use almost any piece of equipment. Our public and private land nav vehicles work on the same core principles as our most complex flying or starship systems. As such, she had only a few quick taps before she located the coordinates she needed. "Here. Radiation levels are low, but you still might want to take a Magna Radiant box. There probably won't be anyone to meet us, but they'll see the shuttle coming and realize it's me," Bao explained and cleared her throat. "They're cautious about outsiders. They have a very low-tech existence with only what they've managed to cobble together, smuggle in, and keep maintained. A lot of it is very old stuff that was old even in the early 21st century Earth. It's going to be strange, but try to be gentle about it, she said and looked at us all one by one, with a lingering, almost glare in my direction. Fine, I answered, but I still want to know how you even found them? Bao looked over her shoulder while she watched the pilot adjust the controls, and the hum intensified with our speed. You really want to know? She asked. I'm asking, so yes, I retorted. It wasn't the kindest tone and my ears tensed. I was coming out here to help her and her humans. I was less than pleased with her sharp tone and bad attitude towards me. I understood she hadn't had it easy, but none of that was because of anything I did on purpose. I didn't even know she was here or what she was trying to accomplish until we met at that coffee shop. I'd even bought her dinner. Okay, I hadn't. My university had. But still, it did because of me. A little respect wouldn't have hurt. I suppose my retort told her I was getting fed up. So rather than give me more unpleasant answers, she began to explain. It was an accident. Since I have a high resistance to radiation as a result of my work obligations, I thought I could sneak into the dead zones that humans don't visit anymore. My plan was to go into the dead zones and find artifacts. Artifacts. What good would old broken things from a bygone era do to you? Bonnie asked. Archaeology. Old artifacts tell you a lot about a culture, especially if you can find them in an intact context. Bao explained, and Bonnie cocked her head at her. Those are all words, she said dryly. She means that where things are found, it tells you a lot about the people who used them. A table with multiple chairs tells you that the culture assumes a family unit or guests. If the table is apart from the kitchen, having a whole room for eating that isn't in the same place as food preparation, tells you they valued the social experience and probably were not all involved in the cooking process. The tools they use, the clothing they wear, it all says something about their beliefs, values, and traditions. Exactly, Bao said, and looked at me with the first expression of respect I got from her. My brother didn't get his spot for nothing, I see. It wasn't exactly a compliment, but at least it wasn't an expression of hostility. So I went there intending to find artifacts and write about humans from a theoretical point of view, get the attention of the anthropology department with my work, then eventually leverage my anonymous but quality work for immunity and a position that would get me an official degree and the status I needed to get the life I wanted. Bao explained her plan, but wasn't looking at any of us when she said it. She was looking down at the floor, and the 720 vid detection gave her a view of the ground outside. So, finding humans there? It was a total accident? Bonnie asked. Her tail started wagging as if she'd been told a dad joke. Yes. There are only a few hundred or so. Nobody knows for sure. They don't exactly do a census. All scattered over an area roughly, well, they still use the old human measurements of the country that used to be here. They say 280 miles in area, the old city and the wilds around it, including small settlements. They found me foraging in an old skyscraper when I lit a fire on the roof to make camp for the night. Bao became quiet, almost sullen, but more pensive or perhaps sad. Nailing down her emotion was difficult at best. It was as if she wasn't sure whether she even could speak, let alone should speak. So for what seemed like a long time, there was only the hum of the engine and the view below of the terrain racing away beneath us for distraction. It was a group of human children who found me. Pathetic things, dirty, hungry, carrying wooden spears, and they all showed signs of radiation exposure without treatment. I'm not sure what they expected to find, but it wasn't me. I offered some of my rations to them. I learned that humans respond well to invitations to share food. And these were half-starved. They scrambled and struggled over the little Nutri-Bar I tossed over to them, and didn't stop until I offered them enough for each to have one. I was lucky their language survived intact. Bao's ears hung and her tail drooped. As soon as they finished eating, they came closer to me and put down their spears. They cuddled up against me and began to rub my head and scratch my ears. They were so warm, but I could feel the suffering in their underfed bodies. I do not know why, but when I looked into their eyes, they seemed just so lost, and like they thought I'd come there just to help them. She let out a little whine from deep in her throat before she said, I didn't know it at the time, but I had. Chapter 19. I couldn't tell my sister I knew what she felt like. Though I thought that I knew, I felt the same intensity when I saw Fauve in what I thought of as danger, and again when I thought I might have to leave Earth. It wasn't exactly the same feeling, but I knew all too well how intensely humans could bring that out in us. In the first edition of this work, I neglected to bring up an important matter. notably my sister's specific mention of the warmth my sister felt at the close proximity of humans, and the sensation she felt when making eye contact with them. The former is easy enough to explain. Blamius was a very rigid and structured place. Close bonds are not encouraged, and physical contact is minimized outside of our mating seasons, and it is usually completely absent for year upon year, as members of our sexes deliberately have that impulse chemically suppressed to focus on their work or other ambitions at crucial times. So a familiar touch, which humans begin to offer when they bond with someone, or are attempting to forge a bond with someone, is to us like food to the starving or water to the thirsty. As to the latter, the answer lies in the brains of humans and Dlamacins. By some strange quirk of evolution, eye contact between our species and humans stimulated the production of oxytocin. Dlamacin culture and chemical use has long conspired to minimize the production of this chemical, and with minimal friendliness or physical contact, our brains produced very little of it. This is similarly true of other predator species that militarized to protect themselves during the chaotic age. Humans, however, had no such inhibitions, and did not have any of the usual cultural or artificial inhibitors against the kind of contact that could stimulate its production. In my later attempts at scanning pre, present, and post-eye contact brains, I was shocked to discover that eye contact with humans sent oxytocin production levels in my brain up over 300%. Similarly, as physical contact continued over time, an underdeveloped part of my brain began to show activity that only increased with time and affiliation. To put it simply, that part of my brain, and those of others of my species, had a special purpose. This purpose exists in human brains as well. It's the part of the brain that references the closest of all bonds, the part that references family. The eye contact and physical contact of humans jump-started our ability to feel a wide array of positive emotions that we buried in ourselves generations ago. Studies of other predatory species such as cowics and blowups, and even my professors, showed the same thing to one degree or another. Human brains saw oxytocin production rise over 130% on eye contact with a familiar Dlamacin, and that is at the low end of the spectrum of those whom I studied. How this could be was a subject of some doubt for me at first. It seemed strange to me that this would be the case since we had not evolved on the same world. But further evaluation showed that human pheromones are readily detectable by all sensitive predatory species, and eye contact with humans helped us to focus on taking those in. This in turn resulted in our oxytocin production going into absolute overdrive. In short, humans had an easy time getting us to connect with them in ways no other species had ever done before. Moreover, it applied across a multitude of predatory species. Kawik even became somewhat addicted to this, and dropped out of anthropology class to become an acclaimed actor on the human stage, allegedly doing a profoundly skilled performance of Shakespeare's Macbeth. Though if I may be forgiven for my indulgence, you have not experienced Shakespeare until you have heard him in the original Encanti. William insisted I add that line in exchange for him getting me access to interview some veteran friends of his. I have no idea why. Suffice it to say, understanding Bao's sudden and rapid attachment to humans, such that she was willing to put herself into debt to a stranger and risk harm from me in order to help them, was easy. I would have done the same thing. As I sat writing this for the first time after our trip into the wastelands of the old Chicago ruins, I had to wonder about our respective futures. If Dlamius and Earth continued on our present course, alliance was inevitable. A soldier may be convinced to throw his body into the meat grinder of war, but if you order him to shoot his dog, he will shoot you first. When we are theirs and they are ours, what could our respective peoples not accomplish? Earth's Starmada was already rising to become one of the most powerful in their sector. When Bonnie Red first encountered Reginald Archer, the typical Earth patrol was only 3 ships. Today it is 1 Roddenberry class, 1 Lucas class, and 4 Groening class support ships. I tried to think of what it would be like in 200 years, when the first colonies of Earth were thriving industrial worlds, and a Terran empire would be vastly larger than any other empire but our own. What could 200 billion Terrans and an equal number of Dlamacins do together? What force could hope to challenge us? And if the other predator species felt as we do, another 100 or 200 billion of those? The times of trouble and terror from the chaotic age could never come again. It was a heady thought, to try to dream of a time like that. I and Bao and Bonnie and Boatswain and all of our species were taught about the chaotic age, told from birth that it could come again if we were not ready, that peace was balanced on a knife's edge, and that it probably always would be. But right then, I could see that this might not need to be the case after all. And as proof of that, my sister was pointing toward a monitor where a heat signature indicated a fire, her voice filled with excitement. There's a heat signature. They said they'd light a fire to guide me back. They're waiting for me. My humans are waiting for me. Her tail was already wagging, and we hadn't even seen one of them yet. Yes, I was sure. There was a glorious future ahead for us. We just had to get there, one step at a time. Yes, that is a Star Trek Undiscovered Country reference. Normally, I'd not admit to it and just leave it as an Easter egg, but I had to give this one away. Chapter 20. To say the rest of our brief ride, however short, was strange, would be an understatement. A human would have called it awkward. It's a strange thing for us, since we tend toward insularity and are less social. Awkward is usually very easy to avoid. I'm going to go now, no other information being provided, is a perfectly acceptable way to leave a situation or people. I've noticed about humans that they have a tendency to over-explain themselves. They feel a need to provide reasons for their actions, instead of just doing them. For us, an explanation is typically provided only by request, though I have done my best to acclimate to this expectation that they'll be told things that are honestly unnecessary. It is still strange to me. My brief withdrawal from Fauve previously when I had to fear deportation was born of this tendency to not explain ourselves when taking a given action. After all, what would knowing the reason do? For humans, it provides reassurances, if your actions may be considered in some way hostile or unfriendly, but that is not your intent. Then you should always assume that they will take it that way. Then you should explain your true motivation for your action, even if it is something trivial. I have observed that William and other humans will sometimes use lies for explanations. Rebecca, for example, once made a meal that did not come out well. William begged off of eating it after a bite, complaining about an upset stomach. I knew his stomach was not in fact upset, but that his wife would feel hurt if he rejected her meal because it was really, really bad. So to protect her happiness, he pretended illness. I, however, being inexperienced at this, and not knowing quite what to do, ate it. After the first edition of this book was released, I was besieged by questions about what she made. But I refused to answer while William and his wife were alive, lest she find out which occasion this was. I can be helpful like that, but here, trapped as we were together in the shuttle, there was no begging off of anything. We simply had to land and share that discomfort until we could be distracted by our obligations. The shuttle's hum faded little by little as we descended, and Rebecca asked, "Why are we landing so far away?" It's not polite to approach strangers quickly, or from above. It's considered aggressive. We just have to wait. They'll be sending us a guide. She may seem strange to you, but don't look too hard at her ears. That's considered even ruder. Bao explained while Bosun unstrapped the drone case and handed it to me. It was a simple black briefcase model carrier, and the drone parts were stored in a semi-disassembled state. Nothing dramatic was required. Just take the propellers out of the foam and re-secure them. Insert the base battery and secure the solar charger to insert point on the outside of the case for the backup, and then flick the on switch. Fauve's voice came in over the transmitter a moment later. "Hello, can you hear me okay?" she asked. "Yes. You're coming in loud and clear," I answered. "Great. Now I'm going to lift off here. Please make sure nothing is in the way above me while the cameras power on." "My solar charger is hooked up too, right?" Fauve asked, and I affirmed that it was and briefed her on what Bao had explained. "Okay, got it. I'll keep my audio off unless I need to say something," she said, and the drone began to lift off from the ground. There we were, standing on the ruined remnants of a concrete road. The yellow dividing paint was gone in most places, and disappearing from others, what there was, seemed to exist only because it was in the shade of trees that protected it from the sun. The area around us was desolate, really. Though we could see trees ahead, this was otherwise the definition of abandoned. "We can walk ahead a ways. I don't think we should let them get too close to the shuttle. They are still humans, and they're inordinately curious as a species," Bao remarked, and Rebecca cleared her throat. "I choose to take that as a compliment," she said. "I didn't think my sister meant it as one, but I wasn't about to remark on it. I should add that annoyance with loved ones, even if it seems contradictory, is a very frequent thing. Less so for me because I still had the enthusiasm and novelty of it all. But William had a habit of leaving the toilet seat up. Rebecca never put the cap back on the toothpaste, and Fauve had to regularly be reminded of some of her chores. She also occasionally had a habit of giving herself short vacations where she didn't get her schoolwork done, but told her parents that she did. As a self-paced learner, she trended toward the excellent. But she was still a teenage girl and wanted both free time and independence without permission. She would still finish on time, I was sure. But if she wasn't interested in a subject, she put the barest effort into getting through it. Thankfully, the human education system catered to people's talents, and so the minimal level of competence for adult functioning was all she needed to pass on some subjects. She could pay her bills, prepare food, and had learned critical thinking well enough to not be fooled by every stupid meme to pass in front of her eyes. That, however, did not make her parents less miffed when they caught her. But annoyed or not, they loved one another, and where a Dlamacen might have avoided a fellow permanently, humans were like rubber bands. They stretched each other out a little sometimes, but they would tend to come back in again after a bit. I closed up the black case while Rebecca, Boatswain, and Byron finished unloading the medical supplies and threw on their rucksacks. For this occasion, Boatswain had chosen to actually wear clothing, chiefly because it let him carry more. Both he and Byron were carrying enormous rucksacks high on their backs, along with extra material secured to their tactical vests. Rebecca had only a small backpack, but it was packed full. Myself, it was a little embarrassing. But I carried no more than Bao, a small backpack, hers being borrowed from Fauve, with just the supplies we'd need for a few days out there. I am not a camper, a hiker, or a soldier, or a scout. I did not care for the idea of camping, but as I watched the shuttle disappear behind us, I realized that I might as well be playing at least some of those roles for the next little while. I was missing my warm, cozy bed already. I was missing my warm, hot meals already. I was missing 4 clean walls and even showers already. But as we walked away from the shuttle and crested the low rise of the hill ahead to find our guide approaching, I forgot all of that, now that I was presented with a rare and marvelous-looking specimen.